Brilliance Audio presents In Harm's Way by Viveca Sten, translated by Marlene Delargy, performed by Angela Daw. If she could just make it to Sandhamn, everything would be fine. She felt safer out in the archipelago than anywhere else. Jeanette Thiels repeated the words like a mantra as she drove through the slush on the freeway. She had to keep blinking back the tears so that she could see properly. She almost went into a skid on the bridge over Skurusundet. She drove past the golf course by Foyelbro and the Stroma Canal. The boat was due to leave in a few minutes at 2:45. It was the last crossing of the day. She had to catch it. After what seemed like an eternity, the harbor at Stavsnäs opened out in front of her, and she turned into the half-full parking lot. She fumbled with her keys, but eventually managed to lock the Ford. The icy wind bit into her cheeks. The temperature had dropped considerably, down to 14 degrees. A short distance away, the pull lines clanged on an empty flagpole, and beyond the inlet, the waves were tipped with white. A slight feeling of nausea rose in her throat, but she didn't have time to worry about that now. Head down, she hurried toward the quayside where the ferry was waiting in the gray gloom. She was the last to board. The gangway was drawn up, and within seconds the boat began to pull away. She couldn't help looking back to see if anyone was there. Jeanette curled up in a corner toward the stern and pulled her hood far down so that her face was barely visible. She knew she ought to eat something, but she was too tired to go to the cafeteria on the upper deck. Instead, she sank into a kind of half-doze as the engines throbbed in the background. The steady beat was somehow calming. Her cell phone vibrated in her pocket, and she automatically reached for it, but immediately withdrew her hand. She didn't want to know who was trying to reach her. "Next stop, Sandhamn," came the announcement from a crackling loudspeaker. "The captain and crew wish you all a very happy Christmas." The image of Alice came into Jeanette's mind, and she struggled to hold back the tears. By this time, no doubt, she and Mikael would be busy with the final preparations. The presents lay under the tree, beautifully wrapped, and the kitchen was filled with the aroma of ham and meatballs. Soon Mikael's parents would arrive, laden with packages. Alice had begged her to celebrate Christmas with them. That was the last thing she'd said before she left. "Please, Mom, just for a little while. A couple of hours, maybe?" Jeanette had shaken her head and tried to kiss Alice's cheek, but Alice had turned away, and Jeanette's lips had barely brushed against her hair. She felt a stab of guilt. Why did things always go so wrong? They had almost reached Sandhamn. She stood up and made her way to the restroom. When she opened the door, she recoiled at the sight of the deathly pale apparition in the mirror. It took a few seconds before she realized she was looking at her own face. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, and her skin had a grayish tinge. Deep furrows ran from her nose to her mouth. "I look like an old woman," she thought. Where did the time go? She kept her eyes downcast as she washed her hands. The throb of the engines grew fainter, which meant that the captain was slowing down as the ferry entered the sound leading to Sandhamn. She picked up her purse from the dirty, wet floor and slipped the strap over her shoulder. There weren't many people on board, but she lingered and made sure she was the last to disembark. "Merry Christmas," said the crew member as Jeanette handed over her ticket. She did her best to respond with a smile. The other passengers had already disappeared from the jetty. It was too cold to hang around unnecessarily. However, Jeanette put down her case and looked around the familiar surroundings. Piles of snow lay along the plowed promenade that ran from the steamboat jetty to the sailors' hotel. On the broad strip of sand, dozens of boats had been taken out of the water for the winter and now were hidden beneath snow-covered tarpaulins. Over at the western end of the harbor, Jeanette could see the yellow facade of the sailors' hotel, adorned with twinkling fairy lights that almost moved her to tears once more. She picked up her case and set off.